I'm going to show you how to use I'm going to show you how to make a single crochet pot holder. So I'm using a G hook and some Sugars and Cream 100% cotton yarn. So the first thing I need to do is find my end, which is not this hanging out here actually. You should be able to dig in and find your interior end, and that's the one that you actually want to use. So the first thing I'm doing is making a really simple slip knot, kind of looping it around, pulling. So I'm going to put the needle through my loop and make it a little bit smaller. The important thing with this is that you don't want your loops to be too tight, but you don't want them to be too loose either. So you kind of have to play around a little bit and see what works. I have a tendency to have really tight loops, and so I always need to be really conscientious to make them a little bit looser. So when I'm chaining at the beginning, I tend to make them a little bit looser because I know I'm going to tighten up a lot once I get there. So I need to yarn over to make my chains, and right now I'm just making a lot of loops. So I'm going underneath the yarn and then I'm pulling it through my loop and then kind of pulling it a little tight here. So I'm going underneath and pulling through, underneath and pulling through. So I'm just going to keep chaining. For this particular pot holder, I usually do between 35 and 40 chains. The nice thing with this pattern is it is really flexible. It really doesn't matter how many chains you do, to be perfectly honest. I could do 20 chains and have a really small pot holder, but I could also do 50 chains and have a gigantic one. So I've just kind of found that anywhere between 35 and 40 works really well, and 40 is, I don't know, I tend to go for bigger pot holders just because I burn myself a lot. So you can see I made it a little tight, so I'm just like nudging this up so I can make sure to get my hook through. So if your hook is a little like snaky and wonky, it doesn't really matter. So I tend to go for 40 on this just because I like that a little bit more. And you can kind of see like this one is a little bit bigger. When I'm chaining, as long as they're mostly even, I'm not even that concerned about it. I think it basically all works out in the end, so it's not really a big deal. I'm gonna take out a couple because when I went through this loop here, my yarn ply separated a little bit, so I didn't get through all of them. So you just want to be careful to make sure you're getting all the ply. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop crocheting for a sec and count everything up. Once I've gotten, I don't know how much this is, like 6 inches, something like that. I don't usually count as I go because that's a lot of work. So do not count your first loop up at the top here, and do not count your slip knot at the very end. So I'm just counting, and you can kind of see once you have this a little bit longer, this is like a flat side, and if you turn it upside down, you can see a stitch running up the middle, and so it's kind of like a triangle. And so don't count the pointy end on the triangle, you want to be counting on the flat side. So I'm just gonna count like how many loops I have here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So I only have 24 here. So I'll keep going. I might stop at 35. We'll see how it goes. seems pretty good. Like I said, I have a tendency to make really tight stitches, so it's not really going to be this big. The length from here to here is going to be the diagonal distance on your pot holder. So the length of this, you can kind of see like how big it's going to be, but like I said, it's really not going to be this big because I am going to tighten my stitches up a lot. So I don't know, it'll kind of shrink up. I'm going to pull out a little bit more yarn. And let's see if that refocuses on my hands. There we go. All right, so to start, you're going to do a little bit of yarn over and you're going to be doing some single crochets. So if you see, you have the loop right here, and then you have a chain next to it, and then a chain next to that. So I'm going to skip the first chain because if I stick my hook back through that one, obviously I'm going to pull out what I had just done. So I'm going to tighten up my loop just a smidgen. And then I'm going to skip that first one and stick it into one over here. So you can see where there's actually kind of like 3 different, because it's kind of like braiding things together. You can see there's one on the side, one coming up through the middle, and one on the other side. So I'm just putting my hook through one side, getting my yarn back where it belongs, and then I'm coming and pulling through once and kind of making the loops about the same size, and then I'm going through again and pulling through. Again, I'm being really careful that my yarn feels a little loose for some reason, my plies, so just make really sure that you're getting through all 4 plies. So that is a single crochet. Now I'm just going to keep repeating that. I'm going to go through my next loop. I'm going to go from behind, pull my loop through once, even it out a smidge. Then I'm going to go from behind and pull it through again. So I'm just going to do that for a little while and show you how that goes. It's going to start looking a little wonky. If it starts like curving a lot, just kind of stretch it out and make sure that your stitches are really even. If they're not, I mean, you can definitely like, it'll be fine. I mean, it's a pot holder, so if it's kind of weird looking, it's not really that big a deal. But at this stage, you want things to lie kind of flat. And so you can kind of see how it's laying a little bit. So yeah, I'll just keep crocheting a little bit and then I'll show you some more. So as you can see, if you're paying really close attention to my hands, I'm kind of getting in, I have some bad habits because, I don't know. When I go through, I'm pulling from the bottom here, and then I get lazy sometimes and just, instead of going under and pulling, oops. Sometimes I start pulling it from the top. Which is not really that big a deal. I mean, it's not the proper way to do things. So, you know, you just kind of have to decide, oh, are we going to like learn the right way and pull from the bottom? And when I pull from the bottom, then you can see I kind of twist and pull. And that one's a little tight, but that's okay. So I don't know, when I get kind of lazy though, like I said, I just kind of loop it and pull from the top, because with single crochets like this, and all this entire pot holder is single crochets, we're just gonna do that over and over and over again. I don't know, that might be the reason that I have not gotten very far in crochet, because I kind of, I don't know, I got kind of lazy with it. So, and my stitches are so tight that I sometimes have problems doing some other things, just because like I just pull things so tight, like doing things like scarves and blankets sometimes take a lot more time, because you need to use a lot more yarn. And so I have not actually successfully completed a blanket. I started one and I got like 8 or 9 skeins in. I was taking a class, and then some of my classmates were like, oh my goodness, why is it taking, like, you're like less than half through and you've used as much yarn as it should have taken to do the whole blanket? And I was kind of like, huh, I don't really know. So that was probably the reason. I mean, that was like back in the day, but that was probably the reason, because I was just like pulling my stitches so tight. So I've kind of learned to loosen up a little bit, metaphorically, and you know, whatever. So that's just kind of practicing a lot. I like to tell people that I really only know how to do one kind of crochet, and that is pot holders, but I do them darn well. So, I mean, I don't know, I've made a lot of pot holders. Quiet! I've made a lot of pot holders for gifts and things, and they've held up. You can throw these things in the washer. They're kind of indestructible, so so when I get to the end, I'm turning and keeping my tail tucked behind, because that's going to end up going on the inside. So you can kind of see there's your slip knot here, and you have a loop on one side and a loop on the other side. I'm going to go through both loops because this knot here is kind of separated a little bit. So I'm going to turn, and you're going to start getting a curvature now. So once you get there we go. Once you kind of start turning a little bit, there we go. You're going to start getting a little curve up, and it's going to start looking like a boat, like a canoe, which is exactly what you want. You don't want it to be staying totally flat on these corners here. So now it's going to be a little tighter on this side because I have obviously stitches on this side already. But it's a lot easier to see where you're supposed to stick your hook. So when you go through, because it's a little bit tighter, just make sure you're still only going through one loop. Loop it once, loop it twice. And once you get through all of your loops on your chain, it's gonna get so much easier because you won't have to like, oh, where's my hook? I don't know. So anyway, the great thing about these pot holders are they're kind of indestructible. I mean, it really doesn't matter what they look like. If you totally mess up, I mean, if you start with an even number of chains, an odd number of chains, like I could do 29 chains. That's why, like, when I'm counting, I'm not like that concerned. I'm like, oh, like I like that length, and then I just kind of stop there. If you have like really weird curves on this side and it ends up being like really, you know, warped looking, it really doesn't matter because you'll just stitch it up the middle and it can be warped looking. It's still gonna work just fine. You can throw these things in the washer. Whoops, I didn't quite get through all of my plies. So you can, you know, throw them in the washer and it really doesn't matter. Or, yeah. And this is kind of a nice activity you can do like while watching TV or something, because after you've made, you know, 2 or 3, you can start to get to the point where once you get through all this chaining stuff, you don't have to pay as close attention. And if you mess up here and there, like, I mean, I usually like pull out stitches and like fix it if I notice right away. But if you notice something from like a long time ago, meh, like, I mean, if I got like 40 stitches back, it's not like this is a sweater or something where it's going to make a really big difference. Where things are going to come out really crazy and awful. And that's why this is such a great beginner project. Because, I mean, you get something right away, and whether it looks nice or not, I still have the very first one I ever made. I mean, it's totally, I'll go get it out of the cupboard if you want. It's totally warped looking, like, it doesn't, like it's been washed so many times, and it never, oops, didn't get through all my plies. Trying to go through the wrong plies, that's my problem. So, you know, it's been like burned a little bit. And the nice thing with this pattern is, like I was taught the original pattern and then I just kind of made some stuff up and didn't follow the instructions completely. So I'll tell you what I was instructed to do, and then I'll tell you what I actually do, now that I've made so many of them. And that's just like my personal preference, just, you know, as you go. Okay, so that was my last loop, and I'll pull this out so you can kind of see. This was like one of my original loops, so I'm actually going to go in twice, just like I did with the other one. And that kind of helps, I don't know, I guess with your turn or something a little bit. So this is what it looks like after you've gone through all of your chains. You can see there's a little bit of a curvature at the end here, and once I finish my turn, there'll be a little bit of a curvature here. But this is flat for now. So we're going to keep building the sides, and the sides will start coming up this way and around. So to do my turn here, this is my last single loop that I'm putting it through. And I'll show you what I mean in just a sec. So now I'm going to start going through my chaining. So how I was taught to go through, you can kind of see on the chain, like your original chain, I remember I said it was like that triangle, and we were going through one on this side and one on that side and leaving that point alone. Well, the point is now attached to your chain here, so I was taught to go through only one of these loops here. Just like when I was chaining, I went through one loop. However, I don't know, I don't really like doing that. I don't know why. I don't think it looks quite as nice, even though it's on the inside, that's the kind of ugly part. So what I do is I go through both the top part on that. And then, so it's like I have the point of the arrow underneath and then the two parts of like a chain, because I realize this is a single crochet, but it's kind of like a chain too when you think about it individually. So with my single crochet, you have the 2 loops here and the 1 loop on the bottom, and so I'm going underneath both of those, and now I'm just doing the same thing, pulling through once, pulling through twice, coming through the next one, underneath both of them, coming through once, coming through twice, underneath both, coming through once, and then coming through twice. The one thing you want to be careful of here is when you're going through the middle section, sometimes it's easier to start getting a little lazier there and have looser stitches around the middle and tighter stitches around the end. And you just want to be really careful not to do that. If you notice you're getting a little looser in this middle section here, just when you're doing your loop, tighten it up a little bit, and that'll kind of fix that problem. And to the best of your ability, I mean, you don't want warping, like I keep saying, like it doesn't really matter if you have it, but I mean, that's the way it is, I guess. But you can be a little conscientious to make sure your stitches in that middle are kind of tight, because when we fold everything together and sew it at the end, it's going to be a lot easier on you if you don't have to like fuss with it too much. So I'm getting to my corner now, my turn, and just keep doing exactly the same thing. We kind of added a little stitch the first time because we went into each loop. We're obviously not doing that now. So this is where it gets a little easier to pull really tightly because things just feel like they're closer together. I don't know. And you kind of also have to like be really careful, like, okay, did I go through that stitch already? Did I not? That stitch looks kind of weird, but I can see that I did go through it. So that one was a little bit bigger. So even though it looks like I want to go through that one, I've already been through that one. I just pulled it a little tighter and I pulled to the side. So that's why it looked a little funky. So you can see how much that's really coming up there, which that's good. That's what it should be doing. And you're keeping your tail on the outside because once we get through a little bit, we're actually going to turn this inside out. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera off because this is not very interesting. I'm just single crocheting all the way through. And then I'll come back when I'm ready to flip this a little bit, then I'll go a little more and show you how to close up at the end.